our next speaker is Nikolay Koposov, and he says that for him the main interdisciplinary encounter has been with the cognitive sciences, which have allowed him to give a cognitive turn to the history of concepts and history of ideas. And he also says, I think very beautifully, that he doesn't have any real passions except his wife, who is also a fellow at the Collegium. But yeah, let's give her and she's also here today. And but he does say that he does have a strong interest in the history of Stalinism and the history of Second World War, which, as Nikolay says, isn't really part of his research. But the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, good. It was my second patient, who is my daughter. Okay, sorry. I'm very happy to be here and to have this exceptional possibility to briefly present my work and things which I'm thinking about a lot to you, to this excellent audience. Well, in fact, although I mentioned that I was strongly interested in the cognitive sciences, I'm not going to speak about that today. Today I'm going to raise the issue which is almost as old as the modern European thought, which is the issue of the use and abuse of history. Well, the classical, perhaps, expression of the question is due to Nietzsche. And Nietzsche was advocating the what he called living history which responds to the demands and needs of the present. And he thought that only the dead history or the erudite historical research was a real danger for human culture. However, the ways in which history was used to the means to meet the challenges of the present in the late 19th and early 20th century were perhaps not completely satisfactory, because it was history which basically contributed to bringing European nations on the battlefields of the First World War. And as a result of the First World War, the famous French poet Paul Valéry in 1931, in his Regards sur le monde contemporain, just coined this wonderful formula that history is the most dangerous product which has been worked out by the chemistry of the intellect. And in response to this, abuse of history by using it for nationalistic purposes, the French historiography, which is widely known as the Annales school, has implemented what came to be known the project of the social history, a history which was broader and had a broader focus than just traditional political history, which was dealing with the states, which focused on people's just everyday life, on the totality of the human experience, not on various homines ending on us religiosus, economicus, and so on, but a human being in the totality of forms of its existence. And it was a strong democratic turn which historiography made in the 20th century. However, nowadays, this Annales-style historiography is not living, its most glorious days. Basically, many people would say that Annales school is dead for about 20 years already, and also many people would add to that perhaps contemporary historiography is in the state of a deep crisis, and one of the manifestations of this crisis is the rise of historical memory. And I'm studying now here in the Collegium the effects of the rise of memory on contemporary life and contemporary politics. And I think that the rise of memory has various aspects. First of all, it is what is usually called, politics of heritage or cultural heritage or whatever, and partly we have already discussed it today. And I think that it is a not very dangerous use of the past, although sometimes it can also be mobilized for the purposes of political and nationalistic mobilization. However, very often in democratic countries, and Finland gives here an excellent example, this politics of heritage can be conducted in a very democratic and reasonable fashion. But there is also another way of using the past, and this way is particularly characteristic for Finland's neighbor, from which I have a special honor to be coming forth from. Which Russia gives a wonderful, perfect example of the abuse of memory today in the style of the 19th century, when a kind of new national narrative is being used for the legitimization of an authoritarian regime in Russia. And very similar kinds of using history are now typical of, unfortunately, for several other Eastern European countries, and not only for Eastern European countries, but also for other neighbors of Europe, like Turkey, for example, and for many countries of the Muslim world, and also for Japan, and also for China. And that is why many historians speak now about a new phenomenon of the memory wars. And this memory wars, I think, is just an alternative way of using history, alternative in respect to the cultural way of using historical memory, which is embodied in the politics of the heritage. However, there is also a third way of using history, and this is liberal education. Using history as a means of liberal education, of developing critical thinking, is, I guess, even a healthier way of using it than, trying to somehow develop politics of cultural heritage. Because basically history is an extraordinary tool of developing critical thinking. It relativizes, basically, I have already said everything. Yeah, well, history is an art of relativity.
So much, Nikolay. Fascinating last sentence. Hopefully we all heard it. And our next speaker then is Roger de Lange, and he describes his academic position or academic space or identity as philosophy of science meets statistical mechanisms as well as institutional economics as well as scientometrics. Fascinating. And also about his academic passions, he says that his passion is about better understanding of the structure of scientific activity